5 seconds to go. Start. I am happy to be here to launch the Gramodaya project for the Gonda district, which is one of the backward areas of Uttar Pradesh. When Shri Deshmukh explained the details of the project, I was attracted by his realistic approach to the problems of the people, particularly of the small farmers living in the rural areas. I readily responded to his request to be with you here today and to spend a day in the familiar rural surroundings. I am humble Kisan myself and live in a small village which is very similar to the kind of villages you have in this district. When I was not at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, I was like you, working day and night in my fields in the scorching sun and rain. I come from a part of the country which is prone to famine, and I personally know the hardships of life in our villages and the many problems which a small kisan faces daily. Most of us in this country, in the villages, and even those who live in the towns have their relations and friends in the villages. All of us know the pleasure of returning to our village homes after being away for some time. The people living in our villages are dependent directly or indirectly on agriculture for their livelihood. We in the villages produce food and make very little demands on our national resources, though our needs are many. Sufficient attention has not been paid to the rural areas as to the organized sections of our society like workers in the offices and industrial establishments living in our cities and towns, because people living in the rural areas are not organized and vocal. They are unable to present a full and coordinated picture of their basic requirements. Their claims to better conditions of living and an improved quality of life is not as widely appreciated as it should be. Over the last 30 years, efforts have been made to ensure a richer and fuller life for all our people, particularly those living in the rural areas. Looking back over the 30 years since independence, it is a pity that after so many years, the benefits of the planned development have not reached our people in the villages. The basic problems in our villages like poverty, illiteracy, lack of adequate health care are still largely unsolved. Our efforts at land reforms over these many years have reduced and a number of big landholders who often are absentee landlords and manage to get along whichever government is in power. We now have many small and marginal farmers whose holdings are less than 5 acres of unirrigated land or 2.5 acres of irrigated land. Even if these limits were to be doubled, the resultant holding would not be sufficient to support the farmer and his family, with some surpluses to help him to improve his standard of living, educate his children in a neighboring city or town, and generally live in better comfort. We do not have enough surplus cultivable land in our country to meet the needs if our rapidly growing population, and naturally there will be a large number of holdings which are small and therefore uneconomic. Conditions of soil and climate and the absence of assured irrigation make life very difficult for these small subsistence farmers who live and work on the land themselves with the help of their family members. I know at first hand the enormous hardships which this section of our society faces in a bad year when the rains fail and there is no surplus left over from the last year on which to live, let alone seed material for the next year's sowing. The administration and voluntary agencies like the Gramodya project have a vital role to play in situation like this, not only to alleviate distress but also to comfort the suffering and plan for their betterment. Agriculture on this scale is by no means profitable, and the small farmer leads a hand to mouth existence even in the best of years. 7 out of every 10 of our cultivators are of this category with holdings less than 2 hectares. To label these peasant farmers as kulaks would not be just, because they are not a rich absentee landlords who exploit hired labor and oftentimes manage by influence to hinder efforts to introduce and implement progressive reforms in the rural areas. Our small and marginal farmers are the salt of the earth and the strength of our country. They produce food for the nation, overcoming all obstacles and handicaps they suffer from. They work long hours on their small holdings from dawn to dusk with their entire families and cattle day after day in sun and rain in order to produce food for our people, raw materials for our industries, and for export. They are the worst sufferers due to the failure of the rains, etc. Stop.